topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's Tuesday morning, and here's what I'll say, that in North Carolina, the summer can hit you hard. I know it's not officially summer yet. And for past several days, between getting the coats and waiting for the part, our AC has been down. And then you realize that there's so many things that we're not grateful for. Just every single day, we get to live with AC, and that's such a blessing. And so that definitely brought... I'm very thankful today for our AC technician who's here, just an awesome guy. And just thankful for y'all. Just want to share that. And for those of you who got our books, thank you, thank you, thank you. And for those who may not have had a chance, please do get our books in The Entrepreneur's Garden and Expert to Influencer. And also excited to share that I have started finally writing my book on artificial intelligence. I've been thinking about it, just finished the outline, and I'm going to be working on it. So let's get started, and we have Bill for you today.
Good morning, Divya.
Good morning, Bill. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. It's a beautiful day here in Ohio.
Fantastic. So I know you started out in broadcasting and all that. So what was it that drew you to that industry?
Well, basically, I was looking for a job when I went into college, and somebody offered me a job as a photographer, since I had been a member of the camera club in high school. And I didn't know that much about photography, but I got the job, and I got a whole bunch of books and started learning, and it just sort of grew into a career.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. So like, I know that, you did your undergrad in broadcasting and all that. So you started into the photography. What made you continue on that journey rather than going and starting your own photography?
Well, I basically got my degree, as you mentioned, in broadcasting and television and journalism, and went on to get a master's. And then I wound up down at the University of Texas in Austin, managing a 4-city television network for instructional television, a whole bunch of different universities. And I enjoyed it. I seemed to be good at it. People liked what I was doing. And then I got a job offer from a university in Ohio saying that they were putting a new TV station on the air. This was back in the 1960s. And they needed help getting the station started. So I moved to Bowling Green State University in Ohio and started putting WBGU TV on the air. That was at Channel 70. It's the highest channel that has ever been used in the United States. And there's never been another Channel 70 or anything higher. And I did that for 3 years and enjoyed it, but really wanted to be on my own. So I moved to Washington, D.C. as a communications consultant, doing television and film and publishing, writing scripts for the Navy and the Army, things of that nature. And did that for 20 years. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was voted the national president of the Independent Media Producers Association and traveled the country talking to other producers. But then in the 1990s, when everything changed all of a sudden, Kodak went out of business. Cameras didn't use film anymore. TV and actually movies were all being made digitally. And I said, I don't want to change everything I've ever learned. So I did change everything I ever learned because I moved back to Ohio and became a financial advisor. And I've been doing that for the last 30 years and seemed to have worked out for that too, because I wound up as a member of the $1 Million Roundtable. And right now I'm publishing a book, so actually a whole series of books. We lost your audio.
What a beautiful journey, Bill. So, there are a lot of youngsters or people who may be in the media industry, and then they're thinking, so can you share with us the difference like between, you've said that you've done the consulting, between the traditional TV industry and a university TV?
Very, very different. The big thing is that commercial television is all looked upon as a money-making prospect. And if it's not profitable, they don't stay in business. Whereas universities, their whole idea is to teach people. And money is a necessary evil, but making money is not their goal. So the whole approach is different from the university standpoint and educational standpoint than the commercial standpoint. With a commercial point of view, if what you're doing doesn't earn a profit, we probably won't be doing that anymore. So big difference in that regard.
Definitely. And then that bottom line can definitely drive the decisions and what content is put on there. So can you tell, who's usually like a primary audience of the universities and like what decisions go into it, like who they're hiring? And so if youngsters or for that matter, even middle, like people in their careers for 15, 20 years. So what advice would you give them?
Well, the university, the audience can be twofold. It can be people in the classroom, okay, whether it's a university classroom or an elementary school classroom. So they're looking at students and looking at people who can produce material that makes it easy for people to learn. That's their whole objective. On the other hand, educational television, shall we say public television, is also looking at getting a general audience. Let's face it, PBS needs to have people from all walks of life all over the country watching their dramatic shows and everything else. So from that point of view, the public broadcasting is looking for all sorts of highly qualified producers and directors who basically would also do well in the commercial side too. So the university side, the educational side, shall we say, they're looking for teachers and people who can work with students.
Yeah, and that definitely makes sense. So thank you for sharing that. And what would you say were some of the lessons that you learned during your time in the university TV?
In the university TV, I found that, there are many, many opportunities for the universities to do creative things, very creative things, because they're not looking at having to make a profit on the end of the production. And we did many productions that have won awards, and that if I had to sell it to a commercial station would never have gone. Like I won a whole bunch of awards for a short film on a blacksmith. What it was basically we found an 83-year-old blacksmith who had just retired and was wandering around his empty shop and recorded him talking about what life was like in the past and what he did and what he made. He made horseshoes and he made all the tools for the farmers and things of that nature. And then to show it, we went to a big amusement park in Ohio that had a working blacksmith shop as an exhibit, and used that as the background to have a young man making these tools and making these horseshoes to show what the old man had been talking about. And it won a number of awards as a great short instructional film about what life used to be like for a blacksmith.
So curious, are there any more blacksmiths left, or that's a thing of the past?
No, in answer to that, yes, there are many, many people who do what blacksmiths did. Okay, for example, shoeing horses. Let's face it, we've got a lot of horses out there that need to have shoes made. Now, typically that would now be done by a professional called a farrier who goes out and shoes horses. Now, the farrier may not know how to make a plow because that's not what he's doing, but a blacksmith would have made a plow with no heartbeat, no problems at all.
Oh, it's fascinating, isn't it?
And that was one of the things I loved about working in the public field, is the fact that if I came up with an idea, no matter how far out, if they could find an educational use for it, we could do it. We didn't have to make a profit at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, that's so powerful. And so here's the thing, like, where did the universities get the funding for it?
Well, they either have it in their budget, or most likely what they do is go out and talk to some of the, not sponsors, but businesses around the area that, support the television station. And they'll provide the funding in return for a little notice at the end, sponsored by Marathon Oil or whoever,
I see. No, that is definitely, and I see UNC's channel PBC, which is such a popular, I don't know if they're connected or not. But now that said, moving into your journey, as you moved from the whole university TV industry down to the communications, what were some of the stories that you remember were the highlights of your career?
Oh, there were so many. I did a lot of work for the Navy, for example. And the Navy sent me out on a couple of cruises on some of their ships. I was aboard an aircraft carrier for a while doing research. They sent me out on a guided missile frigate in the middle of the North Atlantic during one of the worst storms that they had that year. And it was very interesting having to strap yourself into a bunk to keep from being thrown to the floor. And it was so rough that most of the crew, who had lots of experience, were sick. So it was not one of the things that the Navy wanted to show on how great a Navy cruise was, but it was certainly interesting for me as somebody who had no real naval experience. And I enjoyed it, although it was certainly not a pleasure cruise.
And that makes us appreciate our heroes even more, right? Like our heroes and heroes who are there day in and day out. Going back to my earlier story, that just not having AC, and then you realize, you may think, oh, you are tough, and then you find out how tough you are for real.
Well, I grew up in South Texas, and spent many years down there, and air conditioning was something you had to go to the movie theater to get. So things have changed tremendously. And as a matter of fact, the growth of air conditioning is what have made cities like Austin, Houston, Atlanta such big cities, because back in the 1950s, they were nowhere near the size they are now. Air conditioning made it all possible.
Definitely. So you talk about the sales, right? Like you had been in touch with, so were you training sales staff as we kind of get into the humor side of your life?
Yes, I got into financial planning, and basically had to build an agency. So I wound up training a bunch of sales staff. And I was, again, in Ohio, but I had salesmen all throughout the Midwest. And this was in the 90s when the internet was new. Email was brand new. And we needed to keep in touch. At the time, if you wanted to keep in touch, you wore a pager. And if somebody needed to get in touch with you, they would dial your pager and their phone number would show up on the pager. You'd have to find a payphone, hope you had a quarter in your pocket to make the call, and call the number to find out what they wanted. Email is a lot better, but nobody was reading it. So I started sending out something funny, something humorous, something inspirational every day, Monday through Friday, to get them to read their email. And it worked. And they started paying attention. Even better, they started sharing it with some of their clients. The clients liked it and said, hey, could we get those emails too? And well, there's no postage involved, so we added them to the list. And then like Topsy, it just grew. And now 30 years later, I'm still sending out a free thought for the day, Monday through Friday, something interesting, something humorous, something inspirational to anybody who would like to get it, no cost. And I'm not with the company anymore, but after all these years of sending out these emails, I found my computer was all clogged up with old emails. So I thought maybe I could put these to use, and decided to start publishing a book, or a series of books actually, made up of 20 years of internet humor. And yes, I've been doing it for 30 years, but let's face it, those early computers didn't store too well. So the first 10 years have sort of disappeared. So the book is entitled 20 Years of Internet Humor and Other Interesting Things, Volume 1. And we'll probably have 10 volumes or maybe even more before we're done.
So tell us a little bit more about what goes into the humor, some stories, some examples.
Oh, lots of stories. Most of them are just little short humorous stories, like the story of Jennifer and her son, Timmy. And they were out grocery shopping. They got home, and Timmy grabbed the bag of groceries and ran into the kitchen and immediately dug through the bag and pulled out a box of animal crackers and opened the animal cracker box and spread it all over the kitchen table. And Jennifer says, Timmy, what are you doing? He said, well, when we bought this animal crackers, the box said if the seal is broken, you can't eat them, and I'm looking for the seal.
Oh, that is. And so did you come up with these, or did you write them, or did you go like search on the internet? How did you get a hold of?
Well, it started out with me finding interesting things, and more likely finding inspirational things, historical things. But then people who liked them and saw them started saying, hey, could we send you some stuff? And people started sending me contributions. And today I'm more of an editor than a writer, simply because I probably have several hundred of these things that I've never used that I just haven't gotten around to editing yet. So content has not been a problem.
So let's say if our listeners wanted to send you their contributions, where would they send it?
They would send it to bill@internet-humor.com, but they ought to be, getting the email so that they'd have the address. All they'd have to do is hit reply and send it to me. And one thing I will say is whenever I do publish something, I list the name of the person who contributed it. And when I'm looking at one of the older ones, I even put the date on when I got it. And right now I'm running through a number of the contributions from 2005 and 2006. They're still funny.
Oh, wow. So
they don't go bad. They stay funny.
And so you're saying that you have a portfolio like full of things that you haven't published even from 2005. Amazing.
That's exactly right. On the other hand, I'm looking for something topical that came out last week. And as a matter of fact, I just had one that I just used that was very, very appropriate.
That is, humor. I know you focused on humor. So what was it that drew you to humor?
Everybody needs to laugh. And let's face it, I was in sales. I had to sell the whole time I was in Washington. And one of the things about selling, if you look at a book on sales, the most important thing is to get somebody, a prospect, to laugh. Okay? If they're laughing, you basically got them in your pocket, and they like you because you've made them laugh. And maybe they'll share a joke and something you can use later. Who knows? But laughing people are always much easier to work with.
So that kind of brings us, if you were to give few tips to the salespeople, like, humor definitely. And laughter is something that brings people together, just like music or art, or it can be, there's so many things that bind us together than separate us. So what tips might you give the sales team?
Lots and lots of tips, because I still do a lot of sales coaching. And one of the things is to use the person's name. People always like to hear their own name used, don't they, Divya? And then if you use their name whenever you get a chance, they're more likely to respond to you. And then always ask questions that they need to answer yes to. You'd like to have more money, wouldn't you? Yes, And after a whole bunch of yeses, when it gets to, would you like to buy this? The next answer is should be yes. Okay. So there are a lot of tips on that. And there's a huge number of books out there on good selling. And I guess the best known one is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which is almost 100 years old right now. And all of those tips are still very, very good.
Yeah, that book is definitely a classic.
Absolutely. And another one that's become a classic is the number of books by Jack Canfield, who also did Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got a sales book out there that's been around for 20 years. And I must admit that I've got a copy of it. So as a matter of fact, I've got a copy of most of them.
So now the sales have changed so much, right? Before it was like, you're talking in person. Now there's so much calling, or it is like people are coming through the internet. How can they take some of the old techniques and apply to this new era of information?
Well, I must admit I am not an expert on that because I do not do any selling on the internet. And just before the program happened, I got a sales call out of the blue from somebody who was trying to get me to sell my house. I don't want to sell my house. I didn't want to talk to him about it. These, I guess you'd call them spam calls. I would hate to have to make my living making calls to people who didn't know me on things that they didn't know about. I think that would be definitely far from my favorite possible future work.
Right. So how about sharing a few another humor stories? We all need a good laughter.
Well, one of my not acquaintances, but one of the gentlemen I was aware of was a retired Marine. Well, Marines are tough. And he retired and decided he really wanted to be a school teacher. So he got licensed and was hired by a high school. And the high school knew that he was a former Marine, so they decided to give him a group of real tough students to see how he did with it. Well, shortly before the first day of class, he'd been in an accident. And he recovered, but the accident required that he wear a full body cast on, over his chest. And it was a thin thing, but you couldn't see it while he was wearing a suit. And so he went into class, and these were all really tough kids. And they said, "We'll see how tough this guy is." And so as the class started, he opened the window and went to his desk, and the wind came through the window and started blowing things around, and it blew his tie up in his face. So he reached down in his desk and got his stapler and stapled his tie to his chest. And from that point on, he didn't have any difficulty at all.
Right, because he had a cast, and people are like, "Oh wow, he can staple." That is very
right.
powerful. So what are some of the other stories that you could share, for someone to have it that they can share with others, especially, for salespeople, they're talking to their customer. What are a couple of stories that they could share that could put their customer at ease?
Well, a real short one, one of the pictures or one of the pages in the book has a picture of this very, very cute little girl. And she's praying, and the caption reads, "Dear God, please send some clothes to those ladies on Grandpa's computer." Or another one was just a Christmas prayer. "God, this year, please send me a thick wallet and a thin waist instead of getting them confused like you did last year."
Those are very, very powerful. So share with us, when your books are coming out and the whole details about them.
Well, the first book is out now, 20 Years of Internet Humor. It's available on Amazon and Barnes and all of the major bookstore chains and on the internet. And the others, next one or two should be out by the end of the year. I'm looking forward to it. And I've got another story that might not be something that they would want to use, but basically, a golfer was getting ready to tee off on the first hole when a second golfer approached and asked if he could join him. The first said, "Yeah, I usually play alone, but sure, why not?" They were about even after the first few holes when the newcomer said, "We're about evenly matched. How about playing for $5 a hole?" The first guy said, "Well, I'm not much for betting, but why not?" Second guy won all the remaining holes. As they were walking off green number 18, the second guy said he was counting about $80 and said, "I really should admit that, I took you because I was the pro at another golf course nearby. And, but hey, it was fun." And the second guy said, "Well, I deserved it. And I'm not a pro. I'm the priest at the local Catholic church." And the guy said, "Oh, here's your money back." And he said, "No, you won it fair and square." We said, "Could I do anything for you?" And he said, "Well, you could come to Mass next Sunday and make a donation. Then if you can bring your parents, I'll be glad to marry them."
Oh, that is really powerful. So definitely. Do you have your book, 20 Years of Internet Humor, on audio?
I do not, but we will probably be doing that. That will probably be after the first of the year.
Okay, I think so. Yeah.
And the reason being is that there are so many stories and so many different voices, okay, that just one person reading them might get a little boring. But I was thinking, how can I do this? And somebody slapped me upside the head and said, "Well, why don't you get the Williams Family Players?" Now, I have to admit that I have two daughters, and their husbands and boyfriends are all actors professionally. And I've been an actor. So, hey, there's 5 voices right there. So we might be doing it in a whole group setting.
Yeah, I'll definitely be waiting for that because you have a very beautiful way of narrating those jokes. It's not the same when you're reading it, at least for me. So definitely going to be looking out for that. And of course, I might even go get that book too. I might not wait because it's always fun to have a laughter like on a tough day. So Bill, what are a couple of tips or thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, one of the things that I like to suggest is that, it's much easier to fall asleep if you're in a good mood. And so I say, hey, get a copy of my book. You can get it on your cell phone, okay? And read a joke or two before you go to sleep, and it might help you sleep better. It's a heck of a lot better than watching the TV news, okay? And the same way in the morning, start the day with a smile. And if the birds aren't singing outside and it's raining and all, grab your cell phone and look at a page you haven't seen before and have something to smile about to start the day.
Yes, definitely. A smile. Yes, a smile is definitely the way to go. So we have already talked where they can connect. If you want to share your website and email address again, that'll be great.
Okay, the website is internet-humor. There has to be that hyphen between internet and humor.com. And you can contact me at bill@internet-humor.com.
Well, thank you for joining us, Bill. And thank you, listeners. Hope you had a good laugh because I know I did. And then, as Bill suggested, you can get his book and fall asleep happy and wake up happy. And thank you for being part of our show. And
thank you, Divya. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. Be well and take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyapark.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyapark.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.